Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with Mark Ostrander and Grant Turner. We are weighing in, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by AthletePS.com, or by Nike Wrestling. Go to AthletePS.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear, like GT and Mark and I are all wearing. Boys, it's been a couple weeks since we're back together. Grant, how was Fargo?
Oh, Fargo is always a great time. It's hard to survive, but we've all survived Fargo for another year.
Fargo to me is the definition of marathon, not a sprint. Don't work your rotator cuff too much, throw in the brick too many times too early. Don't get too excited. Don't get yellow carded too early, all that kind of stuff. So let's start with Fargo. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but the energy there, it's a different vibe, right, Grant? I mean, you've been to been in the Olympics, worlds, everything, but that energy, the people on the floor. I saw somebody do a video like all the fake little handshakes that people do, the points, the bro hugs, all that stuff. It really is kind of a reunion kind of place, almost like the D1s in a way, right?
Yeah, it's a convention for sure. I mean, and once again, it's all the coaches end up coming in, and they're there for a few days, or they're out for like 4 or 5 days at a time. So it's always good to like reconnect with certain people too, because they may come back to the sport and they're maybe back into coaching. So it's a reunion in that sense. But I mean, Fargo is also just a magical place because we've all been there. I mean, for the most part, everyone's kind of gone to Fargo either as a competitor, as a coach, or as a parent or something like that. So they all have the reference points of how Fargo is.
Yeah.
So it's always fun to go back and, just connect with everybody.
It's a very interesting tournament because it's literally like nobody calls it the USA Wrestling U16 junior boys and girls partridge in a pear tree. Like if they ever move it, it'll be interesting. Like can't think of a tournament. You guys maybe can that people just call it by the location. Like they certainly don't do that for the D1s because it moves all the time. The qualifiers move all the time. The
only one that I can think of that they continue to call it what it's not is Body Bar.
Oh,
like women's nationals, because that was like the sponsor of it, like, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, you going to Body Bar? It's like, no, women's nationals.
You have to get it right, especially as a company that's heavily involved in that. So.
Well, I think that's, even some of like the women's athletes just continue to call it because that was what it was when they were there. So it's like, yeah.
That makes sense. So, anybody jump off the page at you? Mark and I know you watched the pod. We talked a little bit about the Rainey brothers, about Team Iowa overall. I know you said you saw my dad, that dude 79 now running around looking healthier than half the people on the floor at least. So any storylines that really stuck out to you? GT?
Oh, for me, all the storylines at Fargo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from being from Iowa, the long-lasting impression of Mark Ryland and the staff and USA Wrestling's, nods to him throughout the tournament was very cool to see. Mark was the, executive vice president underneath Bruce Baumgartner for a very long time, big part of USA Wrestling within Iowa, was the state chair, I don't know for how long, over 20 years, probably more than 25 years. I can't remember the exact dates. Mark, sure. You might be able to help me with that. But, I think, with Iowa doing as well as they did, it was like, Jason Christensen and Steve Michelson were also extremely close with Mark. So it was very powerful to see their reactions as seeing the kids do very well, and all of the, the gear had Mark's signature on it. So it was a really cool piece that I took away from Fargo just because I was that close to it, and also just as a fan of USA Wrestling and its management. It was very cool to see.
Yeah. Okay, so a bunch of tournaments to talk about, and we'll try to hit them all here. We'll try to talk a little bit about U17s, U20s, Poland and Tunisia. We are recording this on July 28th, Thursday. We are in the middle of U17s right now. Greco had one of their best performances ever. I think they placed 8th, if I'm not mistaken. And shout out to the Ivanovs. Not Ivan, but George and George's dad from the Best Wrestler. They had Joel Adams, the Best Wrestler Wrestling Club. Joel Adams won a world title. Like not 2-on-1 pushing guys out. Mark GT will give us like sort of the overall 50,000 foot view. But Marco, did you get to watch any of Adams' matches? Because he was bombing dudes over there.
I did, and he's got a nice little arm drag that he used in the finals that scored him, I think, at least 2 of the takedowns. Yeah, Russell's smart. He's strong. He's very, very athletic. Can't even remember being near that athletic when I was younger, the things he can do. So, he's going to be a stud recruit. I can't wait to see, where he ends up going, because if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he second in the freestyle trials for U17 also? Kind of got upset by somebody. So, I mean, this kid can all around wrestle, not just Greco, but can all around wrestle. He's going to be a big catch for somebody.
He's also a super nice kid. Like, I've talked to him about getting in border brawl and just super yes sir, no sir. Let me talk to my mom and dad. Thank you for the opportunity. And I've talked to a lot of kids that have won a lot less than he has that don't act that way. So somebody's going to get somebody who's a good person. So GT, tell us a little bit overall about, the U.S. Greco team, and then who we got kind of to look forward to here, because this stuff's probably streaming as we're speaking the next couple of days. The freestyle, I know some of the guys, like I know Lilladow's wrestling because, I'm close to him and his family, but who all in general should we be keeping an eye out for?
Well, I think just to reference also Joel's performance,
yeah,
he was unscored on. Like 6-0, 10-0, 6-0, 6-0, 6-0. Phenomenal performance.
Grant, the cool kids call it 6 rip now. That's what I heard.
Exactly. Just hanging bagels on the world. So
bagels.
That's a Michael Pixley reference. So
shout out Pixley.
There you go, buddy.
There you go.
So then basically just as far as the U17s, I mean, my takeaway from this is also that like these guys they're getting that world and Olympic experience at that age, and then basically transitioning that into their collegiate and or high school performances, because once again, U17s, they're still going to be in high school next year no matter what. So just basically taking that all the way is so cool. And then also just to highlight something that we haven't done as a Greco-Roman team at this particular age category and like ever. That's another humongous highlight that, once again, Greco-Roman wrestling, at our age group categories is still a very, very viable option for us to go and win medals at. So for like all of the coaches and parents watching and listening to the show, trajectory could be up on our Greco-Roman position. So very cool to see. Greco is very much alive. We have a world champion. It's very cool to see.
Yeah, and I think the one thing, like, I get that, like, hey, if you make the U.S. the world team or Olympic team in men's freestyle or women's freestyle, you feel like there's a higher percentage to medal than you do in Greco. But I mean, the USA Wrestling's made changes. Some people have resigned, and Ivan's going to be appointing people to other positions. But making a world team, it's kind of like in the old days when not everybody would win in 3 and 4 state titles. Like, your goal as a freshman was like to get to the state tournament and maybe win some matches in place. And making a world team, and GT, you probably see this, it's all over your feed, but all these people that post all the USA Wrestling Nike gear they get, like the backpack and the shoes and the shirts and the warm-ups, and like to wear that stuff. And then if you're lucky enough to win a medal and jog around on the mat with a flag, like I think sometimes we're always looking like, well, now Joel Adams will probably be really good in college. Like if Joel Adams, something happened and he never got to wrestle again a day in his life, he's done more than most people ever do in their life. Like this isn't like the 50-year-old world where like everybody just gets to go. And I mean, there's some guys, but there's like a lot of guys out there that really aren't in that good a shape for, like these are hammers. And like you said, he bageled everybody. So super impressive. You want to talk about
David, who is it that got the bronze for United States?
Merrill
from California.
He wrestles for Daniel Cormier, right?
He just won Fargo.
But he wrestles for Daniel.
Right. He wrestles for Gilroy, which Daniel, Duran, Jacoby Smith, Piccinini, Crutchmer, all those guys are out there, part of that staff. It's clearly DC's the head coach. But he literally just won Fargo wearing a headgear. A lot of people are like, for example, Zan Fugit, who is on that team and didn't medal, didn't go to Fargo in order to peak for the Worlds, which certainly is a super good strategy. I would probably do the same thing if I had made a team or coached a kid. Like, let's not try to get greedy here. Clearly you're one of the best guys in the country if you made our world team. But for Merrill to do that, and I talked to some college coaches about it, and they're like, he was kind of on everybody's radar, but not real high. And he's super smart. I guess he's going to go to like a very, very good academic institution. Like academics will probably be at least 51% of his decision-making process, which is awesome. So, but yeah, he's the one, and he's like, give or take like 90 kilos or something like that, right? GT, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, big boy.
Yeah. So he got some dudes to work out with there I mean, I'm guessing he probably works out with Duran a lot, honestly, so, that's a guy near and dear to my heart. And he's doing like play-by-plays and stuff. I watched the one he did the other day where somebody jumped over the fence and he said, if you think this person's never ran from the police, you have another thing coming. So his play-by-play career is on the come up. We could do some old JUCO Merrimack play-by-play together. That'd be fun. So GT, what are the highlights of Poland? I mean, I saw some of the results. I saw all the results here a couple of weeks ago. So we did well as a country, right?
Yeah, we did well. I think, once again, as far as Poland is concerned, it was really cool to see Joe Colon was back and won gold at 61 kg. Austin DeSanto getting bronze at that tournament as well. Alex Marinelli making his international post-collegiate run there. McFadden was over there. I think there's a couple other guys. I'm losing track of a little bit of, because it was a couple of weeks ago, and I've also had Fargo in there, so I have a little bit of scrambled eggs going on with some.
Yeah, it's okay
right now. But Poland was a good international freestyle tournament for the U.S. Very similar like Tunisia, where we took our men's freestyle team and women's team over there. All sorts of. This is a very cool time for wrestling when it's like all the ranking series is, and you're getting all these matchups and people are traveling and going to certain things. So it's really cool to see. Poland was really good for the U.S. though.
Good. I think DeSanto and, Mark, you I don't want to call you a fan because I know you kind of root for everybody, but I think you're a guy that likes DeSanto's style, go forward, be physical, take ground kind of thing. And how do you think his style will translate to freestyle where things are so tactical and the best international guys are really good at slowing guys down? Do you think like he'll be able to push through that, or do you think there'll be an initial struggle, or what do you think?
I think he's going to struggle a little bit, David, but I don't think a lot of these international guys have ever wrestled with someone that's in their face. He is in your face for 6 minutes. Obviously, it's not 7, but for 6 minutes. He's got to have a hands on you all the time. And these guys aren't going to be used to that. And he's strong. I mean, he's got a grip that once he grabs you, you're in trouble. Now, can he finish single legs, outside single, lefty singles? You know, he had troubles against the best in the United States, you know, especially RBY and Dayton Fix. He could get in on the legs, but he couldn't finish. He's going to have a tough time finishing on those guys. So that's something he's going to have to work at. But I think it's good that he's there. Tony Cassiopei, I think, plays second out in Poland, too. He beat a couple decent kids and then lost to somebody I didn't really know anything about. So I don't know if he kind of overlooked him or what. But, yeah, it was fun to see some of the guys getting some matches in early. Joe Colon now at Northwestern as the assistant coach. It was great to see him get back out there and compete. And he did really well. I was impressed.
Yeah, a couple of updates on some of that because I found the results while you guys were chatting. Joey McKenna got bronze. Vito Arujau got bronze. Alec Pantaleo got silver. Yaya Thomas got fifth. David Carr won. McFadden got bronze. Jay Aiello won 92, so he won gold there.
Yeah.
Mike Machiavello got fifth. He lost to some really, really tough dudes, two dudes from Georgia that have both been world medalists. And then Cassiopei got beat by Baran. He's the Polish Olympian and world team member. He ended up getting beat by 3-0. Derek White got fifth. So a very, very good U.S. constituency. A couple of guys that I didn't mention just that didn't place. Marinelli and Tony Tolbert and Kolodzik. And DeShazer got fifth by getting beat by AD in the bronze medal match.
Yeah. I remember now that you say that because I texted the Paulsons and I texted St. John and, you know, like, it's like, oh, yeah, now I remember. So big win for David Carr and Aiello. Like those help with recruiting, you know, because like a kid's like, you know, we can say, look, we're sending guys overseas. They're winning medals. We're not just about national titles. And we're going to talk about recruiting here in a little bit. So it's significant, you know, because that's the name of the game. Like I was watching some show the other day and they were interviewing some football coach and the guy goes, well, how important is it? Like how much can you out scheme or how coach the other guy versus you got to get the best athletes? He goes, you can come up with the best scheme. And if somebody runs 0.2 of a second faster than the 40, they can blow the whole thing up on you, you know? So getting the best clay makes the best pot, so to speak. So definitely want to just at least mention Tunisia happened. U20 Pan Am's happened. USA Wrestling is doing a fantastic job of putting up articles. So is Flo, Intermat, Open Mat, all those people. And they dug into those as it happened. I think like we're going to talk next week. We're working on getting a special guest to join us to talk about sort of conference realignment and what that means for the sport of wrestling. But I want to talk a little bit about recruiting. So there's a couple angles to what I'm going to bring up here, but the headline is Cody Chittum, the number one recruit overall, decommitted from Minnesota and committed to Iowa. And that's good for Iowa because they haven't been doing very well in recruiting. So it's good to see him get a good kid finally. But there's a couple subtext to that. Number one, he reclassified. So instead of graduating as the class of 23, he basically is graduated. So he can come in as an incoming freshman this fall. And Mark, I'll kick it to you about this in a minute about wrestling, gray shirting, you know, whatever he's going to do. But I think it's interesting to talk about overall recruiting, sort of the rules of engagement of when a kid verbals versus signs and what other coaches do about that. And I'm more than happy to talk about my experience in that. And then I think also it's this, when Chittum verbaled, NIL was not as big of a deal as it is now. Like a lot changed on that. So Mark, you kind of had your finger on the pulse of this thing. You said to me when he verbaled that you didn't think he would end up there, that you thought he'd end up at Iowa. And folks, I consider Mark to be a pretty good friend of mine, or a really good friend of mine, and now not as good because he won't reveal his source, but his source was correct. So I'm teasing, but tell me a little bit about what you think about, like how that's going to go. Will he start right away? Or, will he go full time right away or whatever?
Well, I think you have to look at the pros and cons. I don't know. He wants to wrestle 49. That's what he sees himself at. You got Max Mirren, who will be there for this year. I don't think he's going to come in and take Max's spot. I don't think Iowa. That's kind of the game plan. I think they want him in the room. They want him in the club. I'm not even sure he'll start college this year, David. I think he may just sit and wait and then come in with that phenomenal class of 23 is what I'm kind of, I can see that happening. I'm not sure, obviously, because nobody from the University of Iowa tells me what's going on.
Come on.
Grant's the one that told me he was going to end up at Iowa. I don't know why, all this is coming up.
It was Grant.
It might have been Grant. I can't remember. Somebody that
I'm 100% sure you remember, and I'm 100% sure it wasn't GT, or you would have told me. So go ahead.
But anyway, it's a big get for Iowa. I don't even think this is because he reclassified. I don't think this is anything to do with the transfer portal. Because you can only do that so many times, I would imagine.
Uh,
Let's time out. He's not in the portal because he never signed.
Okay.
So just
admit it. All right.
Yeah, he could change his mind again because now it kind of changes this because if he's starting school in 4 weeks, it's a lot different. Yeah. But if he's part of that class of 23, like everybody that's got their verbals out there, like for example, Gabe Arnold announced on Matt Chat, we did a special edition, he was going to go to Iowa. I have no reason to think in the world Gabe Arnold's going to change his decision. But until he signs, he's not signed. And then he could still change his mind until he actually shows up on campus. So it's a whole different deal, but it's not portal until he's gone and then wants to leave a college. It's not portal, just minor correction there.
But I think Iowa, they were probably 10th, 11th for the 2022 recruiting class in the country. And now they move up to like third, just with that one kid. So that's how impressive he is. And Minnesota went from, I think, third or fourth down to 11th in their recruiting class.
Spots.
Yeah. So, that's big because this is a kid that you would expect to be a multiple All-American, if not a national champion before he's done. So, it's a great get for Iowa, and you feel bad for Minnesota because I think he would have done great up there also.
Yeah, he's a huge recruit. So, GT, I'll start with you on this. I will preface this by what the rules were in junior college. In junior college, there was no fall signing period. I think there is now, but I don't think there was. And in junior college, it was 16 national letters of intent. I think now it's up to 20 or 22. But no school had 16 full rides. But if there were 16 full rides or 3 full rides, you could only give it to 16 kids. And, in junior college also, like, let's say a kid signed with you in the fall now, and then he made the clearinghouse come the spring, his letter of intent was not binding to prevent him from going to a D1 or D2 school. It only prevented him from going to a different junior college, within the same division. So there's a guy that's no longer coaching, but would just do some super unethical stuff. And he had a kid that verbaled to him. And I knew he lied to him. So I kept calling the kid. And he called me one day and he's like, hey, stop calling so-and-so. He's verbaled. And I'm like, look, it's like, and I'll say, it's like you guys are dating. You're not even going steady. You're certainly not engaged or married. And I know what you told him and I know what the truth is. And I'm going to keep calling him. And we ended up getting him. I think that's how a lot of these coaches approach it. I'll say one more thing, and then you're still in the recruiting game. I know you guys have a good division of labor up there. You have a great staff. But I think a lot of times, too, coaches will misconstrue a kid's commitment because, like, like, I'll say it this way, Grant, because I'm older than you. Like, if I bring you on the campus of Grandview University and like you're walking around like, hey man, wouldn't you want to be a Viking? And you go, yeah, that'd be great. That's not a verbal. That's you just not wanting to be confrontational and saying, no, I don't think so, when you're surrounded by everybody that wants you to go there and you're 17 or 18 years old. So I know you've been in your share of recruiting battles. I'm trying to take a step back from Chittum in particular, but just use him as an example of kids that flip their commitment. And I also am a capitalist, so I love the fact that if kids can get a better deal, that, you know, it used to be the loyalty was only one way, you know, like only, you know, the kid had to be loyal to the school. You know, like if Nick Mitchell left Grandview, now these kids could actually go in the portal if they wanted to, like what we saw with McKendree with Sam Schmidt. So really long preamble, I apologize, but what are your thoughts on recruiting and breaking commitments and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, this we could do at least 4 pods just on this topic alone. I think there's so much to unpack when it comes to the recruiting process, commitment, decommitment, NIL, loyalty to a program, loyalty to a coach. I mean, there's countless examples of those type of situations where it's either been beneficial to the school, beneficial to the athlete, beneficial to the coach that ends up leaving. Just right off the top of my head, without really getting into a ton of specifics, but there's, you know, one of my teammates back in college, Kurt Backus, he had verbally committed to the University of Minnesota as well, and then uncommitted and then recommitted to Iowa State later in his process.
Okay.
You know, I also know that like back in the day when Tom Brands was at Virginia Tech, and then those kids were not allowed to then follow Tom back to the University of Iowa at that time, where the school ended up flexing on those kids to say, you know, hey, you know, you had committed to Virginia Tech. You guys have, you know, basically lost a year of eligibility that way.
And real quick, and I'll get out of the way, KJ did the opposite thing with David Taylor, who had committed to Iowa State and wanted to go wrestle for Cale. He let him out of his letter. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like Kyler Sanderson, same thing. When Cale got the job at Penn State, they basically released him rather than saying, hey, no, you got to stay here. So, I mean, once again, there's options and there's tons of, and I don't even want to get into the specifics of like each division, but I'm sure that there's like some technical terms that are within the division or NCAA or JUCO or NAIA or women's club division where there's like some things that you can play with there. But I think to come full circle on kind of how we've started this conversation around Chittum, basically with his ability to then choose his place to go, back out of maybe a verbal commitment, not an actual signed, I'm coming here commitment, stepping on campus. I think the athlete has a lot more say in their process now. And I think not to say that NIL would have been a part of that conversation, but just his ability to choose where he wants to go get his education and or wrestle. Because, yeah, to your point, maybe 51% of the reason why he's going to Iowa is to wrestle. Probably a lot higher percentage than that. But if that's where he wants to go and that's where his mind has led him to, congratulations.
Yeah, but one thing, I got to say something here because this is a hard part. When you give money to a student athlete to come to your school and you give him a full ride, you know, especially Division I, you get 9.9 in wrestling, and you have that money set aside, and you're not out there looking for other guys to spend that money on, and then right toward the end of the year, you know, and I understand he was a 2023 commitment, so they have another year to go find somebody, but most of the really, really good kids have already committed or, you know, maybe weren't looking at Minnesota and now they may change their minds now that he's not going to be there. There's a spot maybe for him, but that makes it hard on the coaching staff trying to figure out what to do with their money, where to spend it. I wish there was a different way to do it for the University of Minnesota and this doesn't happen just to Minnesota. This has happened pretty much to every school out there has lost somebody that they were invested in and were willing to spend a scholarship on and really was looking forward to having them. All of a sudden last minute they flip and go somewhere else. It's tough to, you know, reload with somebody that quality.
I mean, like another example of just the scholarship side of it is like, we're not going to dig into this, but like Ferrari was obviously on money at Oklahoma State. You know, I don't know if he was on academic money. I don't know if he was able to get in-state money because they moved there as a family, but he's clearly not a walk-on. I mean, I think we can agree to that. He's somewhere between 1 and 100%. And so that money essentially becomes dead. And people are like, oh, well, like, I'll just, if I'm the head coach, like, well, I'm going to pick let's say the money's 8%, because I'm sure that's wrong. And so nobody will quote me as saying that AJ Ferrari was an 8% scholarship. But I'm like, I'm going to give Mark 4 and give Grant 4. Well, that's nice for Mark and Grant, but that doesn't actually help my team get better. I've just spread the money out over kids that are already there. And, now it might even create a problem because now next year you want that money again. And that wasn't what you agreed to, when you first came on. And so you said it right, Mark. You wish there was just a better way to do it. I think the other thing is this, and we've all been in this business for a long time. When your mood, when your vocation is based on the decisions of 16 to 18-year-olds, you're going to have some high days and some low days. Like you're going to be the bug sometimes and you're going to be the windshield sometimes. Like, there's a Brandon Agam and there's a Tom Brands in this conversation. And on another day, it might be the opposite, So it's, I'm torn because like, I remember I had Tadaka Hata on and he was saying how back then, like, like Oklahoma State, like they got everybody, I know a junior college coach who told a kid there was a football team to get the kid to come. The kid showed up and there was no football team. Now, I mean, and, this was back when you couldn't just Google whether the school had a team or not. And I mean, like the kid told me that. He's like, yeah, Coach so-and-so said this. And I ended up just wrestling. And the kid ended up being an All-American. He goes, but I probably wouldn't have went there because I wanted to do both. So, I mean, sometime we'll do a happy hour, one of these pods, and everybody will get a mule and we'll tell some recruiting stories. And then we'll send it to USA Wrestling and let them edit the hell out of it. But I mean, there's a bunch of sides to this. I think though, in general, like Iowa, it feels like it's just been the spring and summer of the state of Iowa. I mean, GT, you mentioned it, and it's the one storyline we didn't hit on, the celebration of Mark Ryland. Mark Ryland was actually really important to me. The first year we ran Missouri Border Brawl, he was my Iowa guy to like get phone numbers from. And, he's, for people that don't know him, he's kind of was a gruff, he's not like a huggy guy, but he would get it done. Like, if you texted him or emailed him, he would send you back the numbers and the names within a day or two. And, if I said, Coach, do you mind if I say to them that you think this is a good event? He goes, yeah, go ahead. Well, that, the nod you gave there is everything, right, GT? Like if you have the Mark Ryland seal of endorsement as a startup event, I don't know if Max Thompson or Hochschlag even wrestle in the first Border Brawl if it wasn't for those guys, if it isn't for Mark Ryland, and both those guys ended up being Division I All-Americans. So, I mean, you love everybody that wrestles in your event, but the people that come in at the beginning. So, I mean, but you take the Mark Ryland story, junior duels, the girls winning cadets, which I think Mark said last year they were 21st or something. I might have that wrong, but give or take somewhere in there, the boys smashing junior freestyle. It just feels, and then what I was doing in recruiting, getting real Woods, because like when we had Earl on in the Intermat preseason rankings, like if they don't have real Woods, they're back in that pack with everybody else, just like if Minnesota adds Gable, they kind of break out of the pack. So what is the mood? And I guess you guys are both in the Des Moines, Ankeny area, but not far from Iowa City. what is the mood very optimistic up there? Is it like we got to get more? I know they're building a new facility. Mark, I'll start with you. Like, what's the energy up there like?
Yeah, I went to the golf outing and Tom talked. Dan Gable was out there for one of the first times that I've seen him out there, and he went around and visited with everybody and rode around the golf course. Yeah, they were talking about, starting the new facility. Obviously, they broke ground on it now, and that's going. Hawkeye Wrestling Club's doing a great job raising money with Chad Beatty being the director. He's done a good job. They lost so much talent last year, Grant, and we had talked about this. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? And then they just bring in a class that's just, very similar to what Ohio State brought in this year, with one, I think they had the number 1, the number 3, and the number 4 kid in the country, coming in. Well, Iowa, if Chittum doesn't start wrestling, they've got 1, 5, 6, 9, I think. So they got 4 of the top 10. So it's just, things are going well. I mean, Tom Brand's just got a new coaching or extension on his contract, which will make him, from everything I read, the highest paid Division I wrestling coach in the country. So, which is, good for him. And I know his assistant coaches. I know Morningstar got an extension to 2028 also, or something like that, 2029. So, I mean, they're doing things the right way. And it's important to the state of Iowa. They need their wrestling.
GT, you're around. I mean, just full disclosure, Iowa's a Nike school, and Hawkeye Wrestling Club is a Nike club. And I know you and Shane both have regular conversations with those guys. I'm guessing you probably talk to them at a different level than most of us do. So I know they're not going to be satisfied till they have 10 national champions. So I think that's sort of the obvious thing. And then they'll be mad they didn't pin everybody. But just in general, what's the mood up there?
Well, Mark nailed it on the head, especially for the University of Iowa. I think the entire state of Iowa, wants to see the in-state schools do well. And I think, Kevin Dresser also has a top 5 recruiting class coming in with all of those guys coming in as well. Yeah. Doug Schwab had a couple of really good guys go up to Fargo and exceed expectations on the mat. And, I think the biggest thing for, I would say, the mood in Iowa is that the U16 women winning a national title, first time ever in basically program history, the rise in sanctioning of women's wrestling within the state. It was a big draw for Iowa growth within the sport, because even though we're just in the infancy stages of the women's part, they ended up winning a title.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, I don't know, I can't think of another one that's kind of on the rise with that has maybe Pennsylvania women's wrestling. I don't know if it's sanctioned or not, or when it was sanctioned, but
it is not. It is not. Mason, oh God, the kid that's the super high recruit that's going to
Mason Gibson.
Mason Gibson actually put on social media that Pennsylvania needs to do that. But yes, go ahead. I'm sorry to mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, so exactly that. So all of a sudden Pennsylvania gets behind women's wrestling and they go out and win a junior women's title. That's really awesome for the sport, because that is a wrestling state as well. They do very well, and they have, I think it's 14 Division I programs there. So I think as far as the mood in Iowa is, Tom and his staff are getting a brand new wrestling facility attached to Carver. That's going to be huge for the kids. TJ Siebel is running a great developmental group. Big Game Wrestling Club. They just had the USA Greco Developmental Coach of the Year in Dylan Carew. Humongous nod to that program and on its success.
Yeah.
Which then resonates with the junior and cadets and women's teams that go to duels and or Fargo. You can't do it without the entire support all the way up. So when Tom gets somebody like Ryder Block and Aiden Riggins from Waverly Shell Rock, Iowa, those guys have come up through the organization through a USA Wrestling sanctioned programs.
Yeah.
All the way, so that then they can go wrestle at the collegiate part. So knowing that we have all of those type of things, and this is just a caveat to every other state that we have. I mean, California won the overall title. California USA Wrestling is amazing at what they're doing. They're putting kids on world teams. All those kids are going to wrestling college somewhere. But I think the mood for Iowa is that, like, heck yeah. I mean, just had the number one recruit pound for pound or whatever.
Yeah.
Decommit and then wrestle for Tom and Terry. That's a big deal, no matter where you're at in the country. So it's really cool to see. And then also getting a bona fide stud and, real woods for the University of Iowa. That's amazing. And I think, Mark, to your point, whenever you get around Tom and Terry, they're not going to be satisfied until the trophy's back in Iowa City, or if they, they just feel like they want to do more. So it's really cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. So couple just loose ends to tie things up. Next week, we're going to talk about conference realignment. Like I said, we're working on a special guest that's very smart person, somebody I respect a lot and understands the business side of wrestling. I just want to say two things. Number one, today's my birthday, so I want to thank everybody that's already wished. Like about 150 people on social have been kind enough to type in happy birthday, so thank you. And Jason Keck and I put together how the kids that have either wrestled in Border Brawl or going to wrestle in Border Brawl did 28 stop signs or coasters, including 7 titles from the Michigan or Missouri Border Brawls, and including, and GT, you were there, got to give a big shout out to Savannah Isaac and Sabrina Noss, who both won cadets and juniors. So 4 stop signs between them. And they wrestled each other at our event, GT. So, like, again, I'm not one of these lunatics that takes any credit at all for how good these kids are. We have nothing to do with that. We're just smart enough to put them in the event and put them in very cool Nike gear. But it's another reason why people should watch these events that people are doing all over the country. Like, you get to see a matchup. We probably didn't hype it enough, but we didn't know, like, hey, by the way, these kids are going to crush Fargo next summer, in 4 months. Like, you should probably really watch this match now. So congratulations to all of them. Just, it's sort of the proud papa moment where you're seeing how well those kids did. So anything else before we sign off, boys?
52, David?
Don't be putting my age out in the street.
52?
No.
That's what you told me.
29 plus whatever.
Panda years. That's panda years. So I will just say this. I have more copper mugs than the years I've been on the earth. Okay, so stick with that. And so I guarantee you I can collect at least 2 a year and stay ahead of that pace. So I will always have more mugs than I do years. So we appreciate everybody watching, listening, and sharing. We will talk to you all next week.